The small, dimly lit bedroom carried the scent of mothballs and memories. Anna Hastings stood frozen in front of her late husband's wardrobe. It had been 3 weeks since James's sudden passing, and this was her first attempt to clear out his belongings. Her hands trembled as she opened the doors, revealing rows of neatly pressed suits, ties, and shirts, each a painful reminder of the life they had shared. Anna's once vibrant brown eyes, now rimmed with exhaustion and tears, scanned the wardrobe. Her fingers brushed over the fabric of James's favorite navy suit, the one he had worn to their anniversary dinner just last year. She hesitated, a pang of guilt piercing her chest. Was it too soon to do this? The world seemed to demand she move on, but her heart clung to every piece of him. With a deep breath, she reached into the wardrobe and pulled out the navy suit. As she shook it gently, a crisp sound broke the stillness. A small white envelope fluttered to the ground, landing at her feet. Anna blinked, momentarily confused. James wasn't the type to leave things out of place. The envelope bore no address, no markings except for the bold handwriting across the front. Anna, her breath hitched. James's handwriting. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, clutching the envelope in her hands. A storm of questions swirled in her mind. Why had James hidden this letter? What could he possibly have left unsaid? Her fingers fumbled as she tore open the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. As Anna unfolded it, her eyes skimmed over the words, and her world seemed to tilt on its axis. My dearest Anna, if you've found this letter, it means you've started to let me go. But before you do, there's something I must confess. The letter stopped abruptly, the ink trailing off as though James had been interrupted mid-sentence. A second page was missing, leaving her desperate for answers. Anna's heart raced, her chest tightening with a mix of grief and dread. What was James hiding? What had he meant to tell her? A sudden knock on the door jolted her from her thoughts. She scrambled to her feet, clutching the letter to her chest. Her neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, peeked in. Anna, are you all right? The elderly woman asked, concern etching her face. I thought I heard something fall. I'm fine, Anna replied hastily, her voice wavering. She forced a weak smile. Just sorting through some of James's things. Mrs. Calloway nodded sympathetically. Take your time, dear. I'm just next door if you need me. As the door clicked shut, Anna's resolve hardened. She had to find the missing page. Whatever James had kept from her, it was buried in the remnants of his life, and she wouldn't stop until she unearthed the truth. Her gaze drifted back to the wardrobe, now a labyrinth of secrets waiting to be unraveled. The unanswered questions tugged at her soul, each one more agonizing than the last. And so began Anna's descent into a mystery that would shatter everything she thought she knew about her husband and herself. Anna Hastings' life was a portrait of quiet perseverance. Raised in a working-class family, she had grown up in a small town where dreams often seemed to float just beyond reach. Her parents, hardworking and kind, had instilled in her a sense of responsibility that sometimes felt like both a gift and a chain. By the time she met James, her world was already confined to simple aspirations. A stable job, a loving home, and perhaps one day, a family of her own. James Hastings, however, had stepped into her life like a gust of wind blowing the curtains open. Charming, confident, and impossibly polished, James was everything Anna wasn't. A corporate attorney at a prestigious firm, he lived a life of tailored suits, fine dining, and invitations to glittering events that Anna could only imagine. When he looked at her with those piercing blue eyes and that disarming smile, Anna had felt, for the first time, like the world might offer her more than she dared to ask for. But beneath James's polished exterior lay a man who carried secrets. While Anna's struggles were worn openly, her modest income, her quiet fears of inadequacy, James wore his as armor. He rarely spoke of his past, brushing aside questions with a laugh or a quick kiss. Anna, so enamored with him, never pressed too hard. Love, she thought, required trust even when it left gaps. Their early years together had been blissful. James's world was intoxicating, and Anna, in her simplicity, grounded him. They married within a year of meeting, moving into a charming house in the suburbs. Though they had no children, their shared routines, Sunday brunches, late-night talks, felt like enough. Yet, as time wore on, Anna began to sense a shift. James's once warm demeanor grew colder, and he started spending more nights at the office. She told herself it was stress, that he loved her just as much as he always had. Still, the distance between them widened like a slow, unrelenting tide. Now, alone in their house, Anna felt like a ghost haunting the life she had built with James. The days following his death were a haze of casseroles from neighbors, sympathetic glances, and the unbearable silence of an empty home. She had always prided herself on being strong, but grief was a beast she hadn't been prepared to face. The discovery of the letter had reopened wounds that had barely begun to heal. Questions gnawed at her. What had James been hiding? Why had he stopped writing? And where was the missing page? The more she dwelled on it, the more her sadness gave way to a gnawing sense of betrayal. She had spent years loving James with everything she had. Was it possible that he hadn't done the same? Unable to sleep, Anna began digging through James's belongings late into the night. She searched his desk, his drawers, even his old briefcase. It was in the lining of the briefcase that she found something odd. A small key, taped discreetly to the leather. Her heart pounded as she held it in her hand. A new layer of mystery unfolding before her. What could it unlock? The letter, the key. James was leading her on a trail she hadn't asked to follow. But now she had no choice. For James, life had always been about control. Born into a wealthy family with a stern father and a cold, distant mother, he learned early that emotions were liabilities. His parents' expectations were clear. He was to excel in everything he did. No excuses, no failures. James met those expectations, becoming the golden boy who never faltered. But the cost of his success was steep, leaving him with scars that even Anna's love couldn't fully heal. Behind the facade of the perfect husband, James harbored a secret life. One he had kept meticulously hidden from Anna. It wasn't an affair, nor was it the simple weight of his demanding job. It was something darker, something that tied him to a shadowy chapter of his past that he had spent years trying to escape. And when it caught up to him, when it threatened the carefully constructed life he had built, James had written the letter. He had planned to tell Anna everything, to beg her forgiveness. But fear had stopped him. How could he destroy the woman he loved with the truth? Instead, he wrote only part of his confession, intending to finish it later. But later never came. The small key in Anna's hand felt heavier than it should have been. She stared at it, her mind racing with possibilities. Was it to a safety deposit box? A hidden drawer? The questions multiplied, each one building upon the last until they threatened to overwhelm her. Meanwhile, Anna's memories of James grew sharper, more fragmented. She recalled the times he had come home late, his tie loosened and his face drawn. The cryptic phone calls he had taken in the middle of the night. The way his hands had trembled on the rare occasions he drank too much. At the time, she had chalked it up to the pressures of his career. Now she wasn't so sure. Anna resolved to follow the trail James had left, no matter where it led. She didn't know what she would find, but one thing was certain. The man she had loved, the man she had mourned, wasn't the man she thought she knew. And if the truth was buried somewhere in his past, she would unearth it, even if it shattered her in the process. The next morning, Anna found herself sitting in the living room, the small key placed on the coffee table before her like an ominous artifact. She couldn't shake the feeling that this key was the gateway to answers she wasn't sure she wanted. But curiosity and a gnawing sense of betrayal pushed her forward. Her first instinct was to search the house, and she spent hours checking every lock, drawer, and box in every room. Nothing matched. Exhausted and frustrated, she slumped onto the couch. Her eyes drifted to James's desk, a sleek mahogany piece he had been oddly protective of. She realized with a jolt that she hadn't checked the bottom drawer, the one James had always kept locked. Scrambling to her feet, she retrieved the key and knelt before the drawer. Her fingers shook as she inserted the key into the lock. Clicked. Inside, she found a stack of documents bound with a thin leather strap. A mix of fear and anger coursed through her as she pulled them out. The papers were a series of legal forms, contracts, and letters, none of which made any immediate sense. But it was the name on the topmost document that sent a chill down her spine. Margaret Cole. Anna didn't recognize the name, but it was clear that whoever Margaret was, she was significant. A handwritten note was tucked beneath the papers. Anna unfolded it, her breath hitching as she read James's words. Margaret knows. If anything happens, go to her. Who was Margaret, and what did she know? The ambiguity of the note only deepened Anna's confusion. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. Armed with the note and a deepening resolve, Anna turned to the only resource she trusted, her late husband's attorney, Philip Green. Philip had been James's friend and confidant for years, and while Anna had always found him a bit too polished, she knew he might hold the key to Margaret's identity. When she called Philip, his tone shifted the moment she mentioned Margaret's name. Anna, he said carefully, I think we should meet in person to discuss this. Can you come to my office? Suspicion pricked at Anna's nerves. Why couldn't he answer her question outright? She agreed nonetheless, and an hour later, she was seated across from him in his sterile office. Philip leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Anna, he began. Margaret Cole was a client of James's, a very complicated client. What do you mean by complicated? Anna pressed, her voice sharper than she intended. Philip hesitated. James handled a few cases that weren't exactly above board. He didn't want you involved. For your safety. My safety. Anna's voice cracked. What did he get himself into, Philip? I don't know the full story, Philip admitted, his expression unreadable. But Margaret was connected to it. She owns a cafe downtown. If you want answers, she's your best bet. The cafe was a quaint little spot tucked into a quiet corner of the city. Its name, the Velvet Cup, gave no indication of the secrets it harbored. Anna pushed open the door, the bell above jingling softly. A woman in her mid-50s with sharp features and piercing green eyes stood behind the counter. Margaret Cole? Anna asked, her voice steady despite the storm raging within her. The woman's eyes narrowed. Who's asking? Anna Hastings, she replied. James Hastings was my husband. Margaret's demeanor shifted instantly. Her lips parted, but no words came. Finally, she motioned for Anna to follow her to a back room. Once the door closed behind them, Margaret turned to Anna, her expression a mix of pity and caution. I didn't think you'd come, Margaret said quietly, but I suppose it was only a matter of time. Come for what? Anna asked, her frustration bubbling over. You know something about James, and I need you to tell me. Margaret exhaled, running a hand through her auburn hair. James didn't tell you, did he? About the case. What case? Anna demanded. Margaret pulled out a folder from a drawer and handed it to Anna. Inside were photos of a man Anna didn't recognize, followed by pages of notes in James's handwriting. One word stood out, repeated over and over. Ravenwood. James was helping me get out of something dangerous, Margaret explained. Ravenwood is a private organization that operates outside the law. They control people, ruin lives. James found out about them during a case and he tried to take them down. But it wasn't that simple. Anna's head spun. She had never imagined James as anything other than a corporate lawyer. What had he gotten himself into? Margaret leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. James told me he had a contingency plan in case things went south. Did he leave you anything? A letter, perhaps? Anna hesitated before pulling the partial letter from her bag. Margaret's eyes scanned it, her lips pressing into a thin line. This isn't complete, Margaret said grimly. There's more to the story. A sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Margaret stiffened, her hand instinctively reaching for a small drawer. She pulled out a revolver, and Anna's heart leapt into her throat. Stay here, Margaret ordered. Before Anna could protest, Margaret slipped out of the room, leaving Anna alone with her racing thoughts. Moments later, muffled voices reached her ears, followed by a crash. Panic surged through her. Something was wrong. She opened the door cautiously and peeked out. Margaret was arguing with a man in a dark suit, his face partially obscured by the shadows. He caught sight of Anna, and his expression shifted to one of recognition. You shouldn't be here, the man growled, advancing toward her. Margaret stepped between them, raising the revolver. Leave her out of this, she snapped. She knows nothing. The man smirked. Not yet, but she will. And when she does, she'll wish she hadn't. He backed away, disappearing into the night. Margaret locked the door behind him, her face pale. That was one of them, she said, her voice shaking. You're in more danger than you realize, Anna. Over the next few days, Anna pieced together more of the puzzle. Margaret revealed that James had been gathering evidence against Ravenwood, a shadowy organization with ties to powerful figures. They trafficked in secrets, blackmail, and intimidation, and James had been close to exposing them. But something had gone wrong, forcing him to abandon his efforts and leave behind only fragments of the truth. The missing page of the letter became Anna's obsession. She searched the house again, her frustration mounting with every empty drawer and dusty shelf. Then, she remembered the attic. It was a place James had rarely gone, but something about it called to her. Climbing the rickety ladder, Anna found a box labeled James's Old Files. Inside was a notebook filled with cryptic notes, diagrams, and a map with a single location circled in red. Harborview Storage, Unit 57. Anna contacted Margaret, who agreed to accompany her to the storage unit. They arrived under the cover of darkness, their nerves frayed. The key Anna had found earlier fit the lock perfectly. Inside, the unit was packed with boxes, but one stood out, a metal safe in the corner. As Margaret worked to open it, Anna sifted through the other boxes. She found photos of James with people she didn't recognize, receipts for large sums of money, and a burner phone with a single message, If anything happens, protect Anna. The safe clicked open, and Margaret pulled out a stack of documents. At the top was the second page of James's letter. Anna's hands trembled as she read it. I wanted to protect you from this, Anna, but I failed. Ravenwood won't stop until they silence everyone involved. I can only pray you'll find this and know I did everything for you. If Margaret is with you, trust her. She can help, but don't trust anyone else. Not even Philip. Anna's blood ran cold. Philip? The man she had trusted with everything? Before she could process the revelation, the sound of tires screeching outside filled the air. Margaret grabbed Anna's arm. We need to leave. Now. The night was thick with tension as Anna and Margaret sped away from the storage unit, the sound of screeching tires fading into the distance. Margaret's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white against the leather. Anna sat beside her, the weight of James's second letter sinking in. Philip? Anna whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the car. Philip betrayed him. Margaret glanced at her, her expression grim. It's not just Philip. If Ravenwood's involved, you can trust no one. They drove to a safe house Margaret had prepared years ago, a small cabin on the outskirts of town. The air inside was stale, the furniture sparse, but it offered the one thing they needed most: time to think. Anna laid the documents out on the table, her eyes scanning the pages with a mix of desperation and determination. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together. James's meticulous notes described Ravenwood's operations, corruption that reached into law enforcement, politics, and the corporate world. There were names, dates, and places, all pointing to a single event: the assassination of a whistleblower, orchestrated to protect Ravenwood's secrets. And then there was Philip's name, scrawled in the margins with a single word beside it: complicit. Anna couldn't ignore the revelation. She had to confront Philip. Against Margaret's warnings, she called him, her voice steady despite the storm raging within her. Philip, we need to talk. I know everything. The pause on the other end was long enough to confirm her suspicions. When Philip finally spoke, his voice was measured. Let's meet. My office. 1 hour. Margaret insisted on coming with her, though Anna could feel the older woman's unease. Philip's dangerous, Margaret said. If he's part of this, he won't let you walk away easily. When they arrived at Philip's office, the atmosphere was charged. Philip stood by the window, his silhouette framed against the city lights. He turned slowly, his expression a mixture of regret and something darker. Anna, he began, spreading his hands in a gesture of surrender. You've gotten yourself into something you don't understand. No, Philip. Anna shot back, her voice trembling with controlled fury. You're the one who doesn't understand. James trusted you, and you betrayed him. Philip sighed, moving to his desk and pouring himself a drink. James was a good man, but he was naive. He thought he could take down Ravenwood without consequences. I tried to warn him. You helped them kill him, didn't you? Anna's voice cracked, her accusation hanging heavy in the air. Philip's hand froze mid-motion. Kill him? He repeated, his tone tinged with genuine surprise. Anna, James wasn't murdered. He took his own life. The room seemed to tilt. Anna stumbled back, her mind reeling. That's a lie, she whispered. He couldn't. Philip shook his head, his expression softening. You don't understand. Ravenwood didn't need to kill him. They broke him. They threatened you, Anna. He knew they wouldn't stop unless he gave them what they wanted, or disappeared. Before Anna could respond, Margaret stepped forward, her voice sharp. Enough lies, Philip. We have the evidence. We know about Ravenwood, about your involvement. Philip's composure cracked. He set his glass down with deliberate care, his jaw tightening. You think you've figured it all out? He said, his tone colder now. James wasn't a hero. He wasn't fighting for justice. He was trying to save himself. What are you talking about? Anna demanded, her voice rising. Philip smirked, leaning back against his desk. James didn't stumble onto Ravenwood's secrets. He was part of them. For years, he handled their dirty work, laundering money, covering up scandals. That's how he built his career. But when he tried to walk away, they turned on him. The revelation hit Anna like a physical blow. She staggered, clutching the edge of the table for support. No, she murmured, shaking her head. He wouldn't. He did, Philip pressed. But he tried to fix it. He thought exposing them would make up for his sins. And when he realized he couldn't win, he left you breadcrumbs, hoping you'd finish what he started. Before Anna could process Philip's words, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Margaret tensed, pulling a small pistol from her coat. They've found us. she hissed. The door burst open, and two men in suits entered, their faces devoid of emotion. Margaret fired a warning shot, forcing them to retreat momentarily. Philip took advantage of the chaos, grabbing Anna and pulling her toward the back exit. "You have to go," he urged, his grip firm despite her resistance. "They won't stop until they have those documents." "What about Margaret?" Anna cried, her eyes darting to the older woman, who was holding her ground with a fierce determination. "She'll handle herself," Philip said, dragging her outside. They emerged into the alley behind the building, the cool night air stinging Anna's skin. A black SUV screeched to a halt at the end of the alley, its headlights illuminating them like prey. Philip cursed under his breath, shoving Anna toward a side street. "Run!" he barked. Anna hesitated, her instincts warring with her fear. But before she could move, a gunshot rang out, and Philip crumpled to the ground. Anna screamed, falling to her knees beside him. "Take it," Philip gasped, thrusting a flash drive into her hands. His eyes locked onto hers, filled with a strange mix of regret and urgency. "Finish it." His body went limp, and Anna's scream was drowned out by the roar of the approaching SUV. Anna ran blindly, clutching the flash drive as tears blurred her vision. When she finally stopped, she was alone in an unfamiliar neighborhood, her heart pounding like a war drum. She collapsed onto a bench, pulling out her phone and plugging in the flash drive with shaking hands. The contents were a damning compilation of evidence. Financial records, surveillance footage, and emails implicating Ravenwood and its key players, including Philip. But buried at the end was a video message from James. His face appeared on the screen, haggard and worn. "Anna," he began, his voice trembling. "If you're watching this, then I failed. I tried to protect you, but I made too many mistakes. Ravenwood will stop at nothing to destroy anyone who stands in their way. But you're stronger than I ever was. You can finish this." Tears streamed down Anna's face as she listened to his final words. Despite his flaws, despite his lies, James had loved her in his own broken way. And now it was up to her to bring the truth to light. The following morning, Anna sat at the kitchen table of Margaret's safe house, the flash drive clutched tightly in her hands. The evidence James had left behind was a double-edged sword. It could expose Ravenwood and bring justice, but it would also paint James in a light she wasn't sure she could bear. He was both a victim and a participant, a man caught in a web of his own making. Margaret emerged from the bedroom, bruised but alive. The encounter at Philip's office had been brutal, but they had survived, barely. "What now?" Margaret asked, her voice steady but tinged with exhaustion. Anna stared at the flash drive, her mind racing. "We go public," she said finally. "James wanted the truth to come out, even if it destroys his name. I won't let his death be for nothing." Margaret nodded. "I know a journalist who can help. Someone who won't back down, no matter how powerful Ravenwood is." Together, they compiled the evidence, writing a detailed account of James's involvement and the organization's atrocities. Margaret's contact, a seasoned investigative journalist named Rachel Carter, agreed to meet them in a secure location. When Rachel saw the flash drive's contents, her eyes widened. "This is explosive," Rachel said, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and fear. "Once this goes live, there's no turning back." "Do it," Anna said firmly. "Expose them all." Within days, the story broke. The headline read, "Shadow Network Exposed. Secrets of Ravenwood Revealed." News outlets picked up the story, and the public reaction was immediate. Protests erupted as people demanded accountability. High-profile arrests followed, with some of the organization's leaders fleeing the country. Philip's role in the conspiracy came to light, and his betrayal of James was splashed across every news channel. But it was James's dual identity that captivated the world. He was portrayed as a man torn between his dark past and his desperate bid for redemption. Some saw him as a hero who had sacrificed everything to expose Ravenwood, while others viewed him as complicit in their crimes. For Anna, the public reckoning was bittersweet. She had loved James deeply, and now she had to share him with a world that would never fully understand the man he was. But as she watched the dominoes fall, she felt a sense of closure. James's death had not been in vain. Months later, Anna visited James's grave for the first time since the story broke. She knelt by the headstone, tracing his name with her fingers. "You weren't perfect," she said softly, her voice trembling, "but you tried to make it right. That's what matters." As she stood to leave, she felt a sense of peace. James's story had taught her that redemption is never simple or clean. It's messy, painful, and often incomplete. But it's worth pursuing, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Anna walked away from the grave with her head held high. She had faced betrayal, uncovered devastating truths, and survived. In doing so, she had reclaimed her life, transforming her grief into strength. The world was still broken, still full of shadows. But now, Anna knew she could face those shadows and bring light to them. The truth, no matter how painful, has the power to heal and transform. Redemption isn't about erasing the past but about making the choice to do what's right, even when it's hard.